First of all, we'll start with Mr. Tim Brookes. Tim is the leader of the Endangered Alphabets Project, which is responsible for World Endangered Writing Day. And in fact, today's event is a part of World Endangered Writing Day. Okay, next I want to introduce Chiara Cox, who made the documentary we're going to be seeing. And now I want to acknowledge the many people from the Mangyan Heritage Center's Board of Trustees. And I just hope I don't mess the names up here because these are names that I'm not sure I'm going to be pronouncing correctly, but I'll give it my best shot. Let's welcome Resti Patogo, who's the Mangyan Ambahan authority, the subject matter expert. Jocelyn Baya, who's the current president of the Mangyan Heritage Center, and she's a longtime social worker with the Mangyan people. Well, I want to recognize as well the past president, Lolita Delgado Fansler. She's the editor of Bamboo Whispers, which is the award-winning Ambahan book, which you'll become familiar with. Now I want to introduce the executive director, Emily Catapang, who's been with Mangyan Heritage Center from the beginning. Also, Zosing Evangelista, past president of the Mangyan Heritage Center and the legal counsel. Okay. Also, I'm told that there are 38 students from the City College of Calapan that are here today. The class they're taking is called Indigenous Knowledge and Multiculturalism. So this will be a wonderful opportunity for them. Next, I want to introduce Dr. Cristina Juan, a member of the research and teaching faculty at the SOAS School of Languages, Cultures, and Linguistics at the University of London. So this is truly an international event. She also spearheaded the creation of the Philippine Studies program at SOAS. SOAS, by the way, is the School of Oriental and African Studies. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Okay, from the Philippine Consulate in New York City, we have Vice Consul Kathy Aguilar. And if there's anyone else from the consulate or the embassies that are here in attendance, I want to acknowledge you now. I don't have your names, unfortunately. Okay. Finally, I want to introduce Dr. Laura Murray, president of the National Museum of Language, my organization, and we're one of the sponsors of this program. We're a virtual museum based in the United States. It's been in existence for 30 years. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our website, www.languagemuseum.org. Again, www.languagemuseum.org. Okay, enough on that. I want to go ahead and start with the program. So I'm going to pass the podium over to Chiara. And again, thank you all for attending. And I think this will be a great program. I'm really looking forward to it. And I will have some comments at the end. Okay, Chiara?
Hello, welcome everyone. I'm so excited that you all are here. Before we get on with the screening, I just wanted to give you some background about how it started. I'm the music and art ambassador of my Filipino American community here in South Carolina, and two of my members requested a Mangyan event because they were volunteers with the Mangyan. Initially, this project was just supposed to be an audio podcast with the Mangyan Heritage Center. As I interviewed all the key people on the board of trustees, I fell in love with the Mangyan Ambahan, the Mangyan culture, and their beautiful worldview. And I thought this cannot just be an audio podcast because I wanted people to see the writing. I wanted them to see the faces of the board of trustees as they were telling us stories. And so this is the product of Zoom recording videos, and I hope that you fall in love with the Mangyan Ambahan as I did, and the writing as well as their worldview. Without further ado, we will go right to the screening, but kindly please stay muted so that we can all enjoy the sounds of the video. Thank you so much. Salamat. Thank you for being here.
On behalf of World Endangered Writing Day, I would like to thank Chiara for providing us with a great documentary and just a ton of interesting food for thought here, which we're going to explore in a minute. Also to the National Museum of Language, thanks Greg and everybody involved there. To SOAS, Christine, thanks for hosting all of this. Cristina, I'm sorry. And to the Philippine Consulate. So the way I'd like to do this is that we've got a lot of questions in the chat already. The people I would love to hear from are the students, but I'm also aware that I don't want to put you on the spot by saying, students, ask questions, because immediately everybody becomes very self-conscious. So what I would like to do is to invite you to ask questions in the chat if you would prefer. And if you are a student, when you put your question in the chat, put the word student in there, perhaps in parentheses, so that I can give you priority and I can make sure that your questions and your voices are heard. So please do that. Obviously, if you would like to ask a question live, then you can use the raise your hand function and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question that way. So I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions to get things going. We're going to ask some questions about land rights because several people were really interested in that. But first of all, Chiara, I want to ask you a question that goes back to the very beginning of your documentary. You say that you got interested in this initially because a couple of people from your community asked you questions, and you were originally thinking of doing a podcast. Can you talk a little bit about the community that you're part of? Because one of the major changes that has happened in the last 20 or 30 years is that there has always been this diaspora or dispersal, especially among minority communities who have to go elsewhere to find work. And so in the last 25, 30 years, the internet and documentaries such as yours have started to form a connection between people who are far from their ancestral homes and between each other and between the homeland. And so I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the community that you are in and the people who asked you this question and how you feel you've sort of contributed to that global conversation among the Philippine community everywhere.
Thank you so much, Tim, for that question. Well, the two people who wanted a Mangyan event were originally from the Philippines, and they had volunteered with the Mangyan mission maybe 2-3 decades ago. So in my community, we have a lot of teachers, we have a lot of immigrants, we have a lot of wives, I guess, of Americans. So we have a small community of about 200 people here. And like many Filipino American communities, we try to preserve the heritage that we have so that our children will be able to know something about the Philippines. I think the Filipinos are very adaptable people, so we assimilate very well to any country that we choose to call home these days. But the younger generation, especially the ones who not the immigrants so much, but the people, the Filipinos who are born in the US, they're the ones really interested in where they came from, their roots, what it means to be truly Filipino. So that is the group that I really want to have a communication with, because they're the ones that are really sort of spearheading the cultural advocacy work for Filipinos in the US.
Got it. Before we go on any further, I really want to recommend to everybody and especially people to whom these conversations about Philippine indigenous cultures or pre-Philippine indigenous cultures as a new thing, I really want to recommend the book Bamboo Whispers. So this is it's published by the Mangyan Heritage Center, and it's a beautiful book. It's full of the Ambahan Sun poetry, and anthropological, ethnological photography, explanations. And this is available through the Mangyan Heritage Center website, I believe. And this should be in every library. There's a collection of a couple of hundred Ambahan, which are written in the Hanuno script, but also translated into English and Spanish and transliterated. And we'll get onto that in a minute, just the quality and the nature of that writing. But I wanted to plug the center, which could always use your support, and also the purchase of the book. This is a question possibly for Chiara, but possibly also for our guests from Mindoro and from the Philippine community in general. So many people have asked about land rights and about the way in which, as Quint was saying, modernization is affecting the Mangyan people. It's affecting their ability to live on their ancestral lands in their traditional fashion. Where do things stand now with land rights, and how much of a movement is there, for example, in the Philippine government to ensure the protection of those rights? And I'll take an answer from anybody who has anything informative to say on the subject.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Jocelyn Bae of the Mangyan Heritage Center, and I would like to speak on the topic more on the case of the Mangyans in general. As Emily mentioned, there are 8 ethnocultural groups, Mangyan groups in Mindoro. So for the Mangyans and for the indigenous peoples in the Philippines, it's the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples that is mandated to protect the rights of the indigenous peoples, including their land rights. So at present, the instrument that is used to guarantee their rights on their land would be the ancestral domain title, the certificate of ancestral domain title. This is getting a certificate on ancestral domain title, which guarantees protection of their rights to use the land, is a lengthy process since first it involves documenting their cultural practices to identify them as a distinct community, documenting their resource management, traditional resource management, genealogy, identifying the boundaries of the cultural community, and the cultural landmarks, etc. So it's a lengthy process and it takes a lot of resources, and the government has not been able to put full resources in this. So like yearly, there are only a few cultural communities that is being assisted with their ancestral land title applications. And since this is also a title, although in the past, like full documentation and this have already begun and been finished, since it is a title, there have been, it has sort of had, these efforts have been bogged down by the Land Registration Authority, which regulates land title also. So it has not been very supportive of giving a large titles to the indigenous people. So there have been some problems with that. So at present in Mindoro, only a few, maybe two or three Mangyan communities have been awarded ancestral domain titles.
So I'd like, if I can make an analogy, because I'm thinking of questions that the students might have. So where I live, the ancestral people are called the Abnaki, and they have a traditionally oral culture, and they also are a mobile culture, sort of moving from place to place around northern New England. And up until extremely recently, they were denied land rights because, first of all, the government said there's no evidence of permanent civilization. You know, where are the buildings? Where are the where's the physical proof that you've been here for 5,000 years? Secondly, they are saying, well, where are your land deeds? Where have you written anything down that proves you own this territory? And the third thing is, and you mentioned genealogy. So because there have been various periods when the Abnaki have been persecuted, they essentially disappeared off the map. So in the same way that you're talking about going up into the hills, exactly the same thing happened around here. And so consequently, it was very difficult to prove genealogy because they were denying they were Abnaki. And I'm wondering if these kind of survival techniques also are hampering the Mangyans and other indigenous peoples of Mindoro and the Philippines.
In terms of lack of documents, like maybe historical documents on the proof of the Mangyans in staying in their areas, in their territory, there is a lack of that. So that's one thing that that is also a challenge. And also, but in terms of identity, there's no problem about the Mangyans asserting their identity as distinct cultural communities. But you know, it's since the processing of their land titles takes a long time. The intrusion of lowlanders is faster than
Yes.
the progress in their getting their certificate of ancestral domain title.
And as I understand it, there was a period of time when essentially the island of Mindoro was given over to other Filipinos and Filipinas from other islands to just move in and settle. And so the percentage of inhabitants of Mindoro who are Mangyan has been kind of going down, and the kind of the lowlands of the island have been kind of occupied by settlers.
Yes, that's true. In the 1950s, that was when the intrusion of lowlanders was was strongest. Many of the lowland forested areas were still occupied by the Mangyans, but with the coming of the lowlanders, because of their permanent agriculture, and because also most of them presented titles, paper titles. The Mangyans, as mentioned earlier, are peace-loving. They decided to just retreat into the interior and in the more upland areas.
Right. Carole Diamante has raised her hand. Carole, come in and join us. You are muted at the moment. I'm going to unmute you. Okay. Yes, Carole, you have a question.
A new question. I'd like to dovetail on what Miss Joy Bae was saying about the land titles. Am I being heard? Am I?
Yes, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Right now in Mindoro, the ancestral domain, check me, Joy, if this is true, but the ancestral land is not defined. There were attempts to define the ancestral land, and true, in the 1950s, that was in 60s, that was when a president declared Mindoro as a homestead, and so people from Luzon came over and titled the land. But of course, we know that indigenous communities, they do not have this idea of ownership, of private ownership. Everything is communal. And so titling a land is so foreign to them. It's just beyond their 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 ideas and their understanding. And so they did not. But then the lowlanders came and titled the land, and the government recognized that. Until now, the Mangyans, the modern day Mangyans, are now trying to understand this titling. But the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, would only give them certificates of stewardship, not for the titles and the land that they are farming. They are just given certificates of stewardship, not certificates of ownership like those of the lowlanders. And so
Got it.
there goes the problem of lowlanders and politicians encroaching on this ancestral land. I saw that problem also when I work with the Sami people in Norway, stretching from Sweden, Finland to Norway. When the ancestral domain is not clearly defined by government standards, by the mainlanders standards, then they do not recognize it. But this is now where indigenous knowledge had to be understood by the government, that they do not own, they refuse this sense of ownership. And so you were mentioning about a diaspora, about communities, indigenous communities going outside of the ancestral domain and going lowland or in Manila or even abroad. There are Mayans who are already abroad. Then the genealogy that we're talking about here is they would always feel that that is their land and that it's their home, but they cannot protect it, and they cannot even pass it on to their next generation, because without this certificate of ownership, they don't have anything. And so that's still as Miss Joy was saying, this is really a challenge, because even the National Commission of Indigenous Peoples of the Philippines do not understand and fail to take into heart that indigenous spirit. That
Yes, and I think, again, for the students who are watching this this discussion, this is a problem all over the world with indigenous peoples, especially those who have typically farmed land that is in upland areas that previously had not been especially attractive because it was hard farming. I'm thinking about the Chittagong hill tracts of Bangladesh, where I've done quite a lot of work with.
exactly in there too. Yeah.
Yes, so there are many indigenous groups where the land is now being given away to people from outside that area, along with a piece of paper. This says something about the power of writing here. We're talking about endangered writing, and here we see a clash between the writing tradition of the Mangyans and the writing tradition of the national government, and one is winning out over the other. Okay, we have some more questions coming in. Renato, you're up next. Would you like to mute yourself and join in? Renato Zosing Evangelista.
Yes, good morning. I'm the a past president of Mangyan Heritage Center also, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm a Mangyan lawyer, and I've been handling cases like that. But just to contribute on to what Carol was saying, actually, under the present law, now there is an advantage given to the indigenous peoples under our law because the use of for the Mangyan script and other cultural practices of the indigenous people are now used as basis to determine if the lands are occupied by the lowlanders can be recovered by the indigenous peoples. I mean that the practice of the culture and the sacred burial places, the places where there were like offerings made by the indigenous peoples, these are now considered in the delineation of the claim for the recovery of ancestral domain. And it is very helpful that when we have evidence of cultural practices, say if we get evidence that there are like writings on the trees left by the Mangyans, because that's how we write. We write on trees, we write on bamboos, as long as they are still evident, and even in the passing of years, these are used as evidence to claim our ancestral domain. I think that's the only thing that I can say about that. And that this discussion on preservation of language on in indigenous writings, this is very helpful in claiming for the recovery of ancestral land. Thank you.
Thank you. I really wanted to move slightly into the language discussion area now, because the whole practice of writing on trees and writing on slats and planting them, as Lolita told the story, it's absolutely fascinating. I haven't encountered that kind of either that kind of form of written communication or that use of natural resources. It's such an interesting notion that writing we think of nowadays, when I say we, I mean privileged people in the West, essentially. We think of it as being legitimate only if it's taking place on paper, and even if it's like taking place on paper and it's printed or maybe on a screen. But in fact, writing always began using available resources, preferably available, cheap, maybe even renewable resources. And the whole idea of living in an area where it's a forested area, and so you have a plentiful supply of growing wood, or I guess bamboo is a grass technically. It's just a fascinating illustration of the resourcefulness and also the kind of sustainability of writing as a practice and writing resources. Okay, so Salomo has raised a hand. Would you like to unmute yourself and join us? Hi there. Yes, you need to unmute yourself. You're on mute at the moment.
Sorry.
Great, thanks. Thanks for
Okay,
joining
okay,
us.
okay, thank you. My name is Salomo. I am maybe I call myself as a ancient and indigenous scripts enthusiast. Well, yeah, because I really have like curiosity on many ancient and indigenous scripts, especially Mangyan script. When the video present me about how to write the Mangyan script and the media for writing it, I remember on some scripts that also written in bamboo, which was Batak and Ulu in
Yes.
Indonesia.
Yes.
Yeah, some documents were written in bamboo. So it's like I find that it's some a similarity between that scripts and also because those scripts are derived from the Brahmi script also from Palawa, Kawi, and then Batak Ulu and Baybayin, Anunuo, etc. And when that video present about Ambahan poetry, I have like a question about beside of the poetry, uh, is there any document that written in a Mangyan scripts, maybe in scope of legal or religious? I don't know.
Got
I'm
it.
just curious about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I want to pass this over to someone from the Mangyan Heritage Center. So do we have, okay, Lolita's coming in. So the question was, in addition to the Ambahan, are there other written, carved in size documents in Mangyan language? Lolita, why don't you go ahead?
Well, in terms of Mangyan, basically they wrote on bamboo and mainly in Ambahan form and messages. But in 1904, there was a World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri, and we were still under the U.S. then. And so the U.S. took, I think there were 10 indigenous people that they flew to the St. Louis Fair to show the visitors what Filipinos, how they live, and had these indigenous people, like they ate dogs. So they had, they would roast that. It wasn't really all nice because there was no such thing as political correctness then. So it was more just showing anything that was strange. But one of the people in one of the IPs there was a Mangyan. And he wrote a letter to his family. And because, of course, he didn't know about stamps and all that, he gave it to one of the organizers who decided to keep it. So the family never got that letter, which in a way is good because now it's in a museum. And I can't remember what museum it's in now, but that's one existing letter from 1904. When I lecture on Mangyan script and poetry, I always tell the kids, learn how to write so that then if you want to write notes to each other, you can write. And if the teacher catches you, the teacher won't know what you've written.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's a great story, and it leads me on to another question that I had. And Lolita, you may want to answer this, or maybe somebody else. So one of the things that people from colonizing societies, which would obviously include me as a Brit, really don't understand is the value of pre-colonial documentation of any kind. And so, for example, in Ireland, there is a traditional script called Ocham or Ogham, which hasn't even been fully deciphered. It was scratched on stones in a very interesting way, which would go up the side of the stone and down the other side. And it hasn't been used in any practical way for probably 1,000 years. And yet, if you go to Ireland, you will find all kinds of tourist trinkets, earrings and pendants and whatnot, using the letters of the Ogham script. And that tends to be dismissed because, it's like, oh, this is just tourist junk. But the fact is that this is evidence of civilization before Christianity, civilization before the English, for heaven's sake. And so there is a sense in which when you have pre-colonial artifacts, you're seeing, or it's tempting to believe, you're seeing the culture as it really was and as it really might be. And I'm wondering about the way in which in the Philippines, obviously we're talking about Mindoro in particular here, people learn about these pre-colonial artifacts and practices. What are they shown? What are they told about them?
Anybody in MHC wants to answer that? Well, okay, when I lecture, I'm not from Mindoro, and I really never knew much about the Mangyans until my son started Mangyan Heritage Center, and that's how I got involved. I lectured 2 years ago at the mother house of the Maryknoll sisters, and I had 4 teachers there who attended. And after I finished, they came to me and said, "We never taught you that, and you're teaching us about it." Well, very few people really knew that, there was a script. Very, very few. And so they're shocked that we had them. And, it's documented. Father Chirino said, he documented a few and did not include the Mangyan. So there had to be more than what he had documented. But nobody really kept them. Now because of the money that they can earn, we do bracelets. And the bracelets would have a Mangyan script. Some order some with their names because nobody would know. When it took me a month to memorize my 3 names, I put 3 because the middle name is me. Fansler is not Filipino. But when I go to a funeral, to a wedding, to a party where they ask you to sign in, or if you go to an office and some offices require signing in, I always sign my name in Mangyan. And then whoever asks for me to sign in, I always show it to them and tell them, "Do you know what this is?" And they don't. So in terms of finding it elsewhere, it's rare because not many of the young Mangyans are even learning. For one thing, as someone had said, there are 8 Mangyan tribes. It's only the Hanunuu Mangyans that we have a lot of research on. We have on the Buhid Mangyan, and the 2 of them are different. And when the 8 tribes get together, which is rare, they have to speak in Filipino because they don't understand each other. So in terms of how widely known is our script, I would say very few Filipinos, unless they're more academic or they live in Mindoro or nearby, or because we lecture, maybe they've heard about it, but it's not something that's really taught in schools.
So one of the interesting things as a parallel is that there is an extraordinary statistic in the United States about history and the way history is taught. And it says that 92% of all references to Native Americans in textbooks refers to them pre-European settlement. So the appearance is that they were once here, but they aren't anymore. And so I have an offer for you. If somebody from so the Abenaki have me carve in wood the phrase, "We are still here," in Abenaki. And so if somebody from the center wants to send me the phrase, "We are still here," in Mangyan language, in the Hanuno script, I will be happy to carve it for you and send it to you so that you can put it up and display that it's still there. Okay, I'm curious also along the same lines. Chiara, in your documentary, you said that presumably 400 years ago, 500 years ago, 17 different scripts were identified in the collection of islands that became the Philippines. Do we have any idea about what happened to the more than a dozen that now seem to be lost?
I think Tita Lolita or Kuya Rusty can answer that, but as Tita Lolita said, even the Hanuno'o Mangyan script was not included in those 17. So there are more. There were much more than 17 different scripts. You know, when that was recorded. But anyone else want to respond?
Yeah, well, I don't know if Rusty will, but our scripts basically disappeared gradually, and by the time when the Filipinos were fighting the Spaniards to get out, the Katipunan, that's the late 1800s, very few scripts still existed. And that's because, I think even, that everybody spoke so many different languages. And with us, just an hour away from Manila would be a language that I would have no idea what they're talking about. Whereas I could understand Italian and Portuguese because I speak Spanish. And so when you have languages that are so totally different and also different scripts, the Roman alphabet became a unifying script that, you know, it's like you go to a country, you can read the menu if it's Roman script. It gets difficult if it's Cyrillic, but if it's, or Korean or Japanese, but if it is in Roman alphabet, you can kind of make out, you know, when it's soup or fish or meat. So the usefulness of retaining your own script wasn't that good when books were coming in from Europe in Spanish. So gradually we started losing all those scripts because the young didn't really see a need for them. Resty, you're there, so you want to add? Resty translated. He's not Mangyan. He's from an island across from Mindoro, but he wanted to learn about the Mangyans. And for him, he wanted to learn, to get to know them better. He had to learn the script, speak the language, and read the poetry. So he translated the Ambahans, not from English, which Anton Posma did, but direct from the Mangyan to Tagalog or Filipino. So he's now the one who, for us, knows the most about the Mangyans, to take the place of Anton Posma. Resty, continue.
Thank you, Lolita. Good morning. Thank you, Tim, for raising that question. I'm reading here a book. I don't know whether you can see this. This is a newly published book. It's titled in translated to English, is Booklet on Baybayin, written by Professor Ian Christopher Alfonso of the University of the Philippines. And he, in short, he was telling us why the Baybayin, which is the Tagalog script, died systematically during the mission, the systematic education in faith, particularly the Doctrina Christiana. The first one was published something like 1593, Doctrina Christiana, containing all the teaching about Catholicism, but written in Roman alphabet. But there were mention of the Baybayin. Baybayin means syllabic script of the Tagalog. In fact, in the Philippines, there are a lot of this as mentioned in the documentary. And the Ambahan script or the Hanonoo and the Buhid script were not mentioned. But this book tells us the story of how systematically the Baybayin script died. So you can see here, it's a lot of explaining, but the history will tell us that the use of Roman alphabet, particularly in teaching the Doctrina Christiana, practically, made the indigenous script lost its value as more and more Filipinos became more Christianized during that time. So what remained will be the indigenous people. Then one important thing to mention is that because the Mangyans did not mingle with the lowlanders, they went uphill. They tried to live isolatedly from the Hispanized or Christianized lowlanders. They were able to preserve their script. In fact, there were stories that whenever the missionaries will come in Mindoro, they will run to the boondocks.
Right. So I have to leave in a minute to move over to the rest of the events of World Endangered Writing Day. Those of you who want to follow me over, the registration is at endangeredwriting, all one word, .world, endangeredwriting.world/events. But I did, Resty, I'm so glad that you joined us, because I had, my final question really has to do with the Ambahan as a worldview, because really what we're seeing here is not just a question of here is a script that isn't used anymore because this script is being used, but really the Ambahan, and this was just an extraordinary experience for me reading them, they really they show how the writer or singer of the Ambahan doesn't see the distinction between the person and the natural world, or the inner and the outer. They really are part of the same collective universe, and the poetry is, I find, extraordinarily moving, because it's as if the writer is like out there among the bamboo and the birds, and they're all sort of the same. And I'm wondering if, as somebody who really understands the Ambahan better than just about anybody else, you could talk a little bit about the way that what the Ambahan preserve is not just language, and it's not even just evidence of existence. It's actually a way of living with and understanding the world.
Thank you, Tim, for that question. First, the Mangyans didn't have a view that the world is composed of the physical and the spiritual, which is very, very rooted in the Greek dualistic view of reality. The Mangyans, when they see reality, is both spiritual and body, meaning material. And there is a unity such that the person himself is integrated with the cosmos. And cosmos is understood as composed of spirit and understanding. And the symbols connect them all together. Like in one look, you can see yourself in the symbol and you feel it, you understand it, as if everything is a wholesome. That sense of the universe, that sense of cosmos, that sense of worldview is very much, telling about the type of Filipino psyche or the Filipino philosophy of, understanding the world. I've been trained in the Western philosophy, and it's kind of philosophies are searching for the truth. But this one, the meaning of truth for them is a unity. is a unity of everything in one. For example, when they think of a symbol like a bird, the bird represents the person, and the person represents the society, and the person represents the universe where they live. So all of these things are integrated in one. I was wondering the meaning of, preserving, taking care of our natural resources, just looking at natural resources as material, taking all the minerals there. But, the Mangyans will not look at the land as just composed of mineral resources. When they see the land, specifically the mountains and all those things in the land, they're all life. And if you take away the mineral resources from the land, it's kind of taking away life from them. So that kind of wholesome unity of understanding the universe and cosmos, including himself, the Mangyan themselves, make us understand and wonder that we can learn a lot about the way they look at the world. And this type of view is pre-Hispanic, I believe. It's pre-Hispanic. It's handed to us through the Ambahan. And the power of the symbol to reveal inner truth and spirit and go back to the material thing unites them all together. That's why if you would like to understand the Ambahan, the script will help you, but the script are not just texts, that they are decorative, representing the symbol. And if you take a look at the script themselves, it represents something beyond. And its character in the script represent the metaphor that they're trying to communicate through the Ambahan. So the script, metaphor, and the meaning beyond the metaphor will tell you the richness of how they see the world. That's how I understand it, Tim.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rusty, for explaining that. So I'm going to have to leave you now. Thank you again for inviting me to be involved in this, and thank you for being involved in the events of World Endangered Writing Day. I've put the link in the chat. I'm absolutely open to further communication with anybody. Email is best. You can reach me through endangeredalphabets.com, the contact there. So I'm going to sign off and wish you all the very best. And again, my thanks to everybody.
Cristina, are we going to continue with some questions? I know. Thank you so much, Tim. Good luck with the rest of the day. But there were some questions from Greg. He wanted to know if the more people speak than people writing the Mangyan script, and that would be, I guess, an Emily question, I think. Or if not Emily, Tita Lolita, one of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's someone from the center that would know
yeah.
about the answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think the script would disappear before the language. I think in the documentary, the Mangyan, Uyan mentioned that, and also Anya, personally, she always said the language will take a long time before it would die, but the script and the Ambahan would go first. There's Emily. Emily?
Okay. The Hanunoo Mangyan language is still active. So there's still a lot of Hanunoo Mangyans who speak the language, but the script is really endangered because the younger generations are no longer interested in writing the script. But the past few years, or Anton Posma started teaching the script in Mangyan schools in 1986 when he produced primer on the Hanunoo Mangyan script. So the script was taught in Hanunoo Mangyan schools. Then the Mangyan Heritage Center had produced the more primers for the Hanunoo Mangyans, and recently we conducted an extensive documentation of the Hanunoo and Buhid scripts, and the script has been taught in selected Mangyan schools, and actually it's always been taught in a Mangyan school, the Mangyan Education Center it's a Hanunoo Mangyan secondary school located in Salay, Oriental Mindoro. So Carole was a principal of that school a few years ago. So it's one of the MHC's programs to help revitalize the script, to help in keeping the script alive. So our program, we also support the promotion of the script. So there was a question about if we were often asked if we provide workshops on Mangyan script. Actually, we teach this script in our exhibits, traveling exhibits. We one of the features of our exhibit is writing one's name in the Mangyan script. So we don't actually provide workshops to non-Mangyans because most our focus now is to keep alive the script among the younger generations of the Mangyans. So it's more on how the Mangyans how the Mangyans will benefit directly from this program. So we have produced more booklets, primers on the Mangyan script, and that also include a primer on the Buhid script.
Emily, I wanted to ask you a question because I know the Mangyan people are very private. So how do you, in your work in revitalizing their script for them and letting like other people to know about their ambahan, how do we balance their privacy with people more interested in finding out more information about the Mangyan and keeping it more private, I guess, for the Mangyan people?
If there are queries about research on Ambahan and the script, we usually tell researchers to get free prior informed consent from the Mangyan leaders. So it's not MAC's service to get consent on behalf of researchers. So the researchers have to directly get in touch with the Mangyan leaders, the tribal organizations, to get their free prior informed consent. So we also do not just collaborate with groups that promote the script unless with explicit consent of the Hanunoo Mangyans or any projects. It has to get they have to get the explicit consent, the free prior and informed consent of the Mangyan leaders and elders.
I'd like to add that the Mangyans, the parents don't really tell their children, "Come, I will teach you." It's not in their culture like to impose teaching. They wait for the child to say, "Please teach me this." And so like a girl will not learn how to weave until she's getting married, and then she'll tell her mother, "Oh, teach me how to weave because I have to have a Mangyan skirt for the wedding." And that's when she learns. Anton Posma did not teach his kids how to write in Mangyan script. It was when Anya Posma was asked to work with us in the Mangyan Heritage that she learned how to write in Mangyan. her first ambahan was an order from me to write one on her father's 80th birthday. And she hasn't written a second one. The siblings at the event when Anton Posmari was knighted by the Queen, we had our usual opportunity to learn to write your name in Mangyan. And the line was so long, we had a Mangyan, an older Mangyan, teaching the people who wanted to write their names in Mangyan on popsicle sticks so that they could take it home. He needed help. So I went over to a son of Anton Posma, and I said, I think you'd better help Lion because the line is so long. He looked at me and said, I don't know how to write. And that's when I realized that even Anton's Posma, Anton didn't teach his children how to write the script or ambahan at all, because it's not in the culture. He didn't even teach them how to speak English. And I was actually appalled because I said at the beginning, your kids won't even be able to read your works. You know, they'll learn in a Mangyan community, which means that their English wouldn't be that good. And I only understood it much later because he did not want his kids who were half Dutch to stick out and not be considered one of the Mangyans. So he raised them like Mangyans, and they didn't learn English the way we would. They learned it the way the Mangyans would, which is very minimal. And definitely he didn't teach them how to write in Mangyan, or definitely even learn to write poetry. But I have to share an experience that we had an exhibit once of painters, artists interpreting Mangyan Ambahan in whatever form of art they were doing. And I brought a Mangyan to see the exhibit. And Emily's daughter, who was a scholar in one of the better schools in Manila, she was there. And I pointed to the painting and I asked both of them, why don't you read the poem and tell me what you think? And of course, Emily's daughter read it in English and she said what the painting looked like, which was like a fish swimming in the creek. And then I asked the Mangyan girl, who was only a grade school graduate, but the same age. And I said, can you read the poem in Mangyan? And she said, no, I cannot. I have to read the ambahan in Tagalog, which we had there. She couldn't understand the English too well. And then she said, oh no, it's not about fish. It's about a young girl. It was a boy who likes this girl and he couldn't tell her, you're pretty, I like your sense of humor, I like the way you look, you know, he couldn't say that. So he wrote this ambahan about the fish in a creek. And this Mangyan girl said, it's not about the fish, it's about a boy and a girl. And for me, it was like, it's in their soul. She could not read it in Mangyan. She did not understand the poem per se in Tagalog, but she knew that the poem was a metaphor and she knew what it meant, really. And for me, well, it's in their soul. For now, I don't know how long, but yes, that young girl could interpret the poem the way it really was meant by the Mangyan poet. So that was heartwarming for me.
Thank you, Tita Lolita. Greg also wanted to know if there's a Filipino language museum, because we have so many languages in the Philippines. You would think that there would be a museum, but I don't know of one. Am I correct?
Yeah,
If
I
there
love
isn't, there should be.
There should be, and I haven't heard of one. But yeah, I don't even know if you were to ask me who's a language expert, and would know a lot of languages? I'll have to ask. I don't know.
I think
There's-
Carole had a question too. Her hand was up a little while ago.
Who? Carole?
Right. It's not up anymore. I just wanted to give her a chance to ask a question. But I don't see it anymore, so.
Oh,
Do we
did
have
she?
any other questions? Because it's 10:03.
Right, yeah.
Um, I'm just trying to look at the chat here.
Yeah.
But I wanted to thank the Mangyan Heritage Center for making this documentary possible. I wanted to thank Cristina Juan for hosting this event. Tim Brookes, who already left because he's doing the Endangered Day program for the whole day, and Greg Nedved and Laura Murray, thank you so much for sponsoring this program as well. And for all you viewers out there, 61 of you who've stayed with us till 10:04, thank you so much. Anyone else want to say something before we go?
I hope we can do this again sometime.
Oh, that would be
Chiara,
wonderful.
when's your next project? When's your next video coming out?
Well, it kind of fell through, but so I'm waiting for my next subject. It was supposed to be with Filipinos in the 1940s, 50s were not allowed to marry, of course, Caucasian women in the U.S. So they in South Carolina they were allowed to marry Native American tribes. So that was my project, but it's kind of floundering at the moment. But it would have been a really good project. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of the National Museum of Language, this was a fascinating presentation or group presentation of a cultural heritage that's being preserved through the MHC and other organizations. And it's just an example of how important it is to be able to preserve these the writing and the scripts and the verbal language, so all of that cultural heritage is not lost to humanity. So I think it's wonderful work that you all are doing. And to follow up on Greg's question about a language museum, it's a good thing to think about, because the Philippines have so many languages and many different scripts. I mean, you mentioned Baybayin. We had a presentation on Baybayin a year or so ago that was very, very interesting as well. And if you start up a language museum, you don't have to do all of them, all the languages all at once. You can just start with, the ones that you do have some information on, and gradually build up your inventory of information. And it's just something to think about as a way of preserving the cultures of the Philippines. So I mean, Brazil has a language museum which includes a lot of indigenous languages spoken by peoples in Brazil. It's not just about Portuguese, for example. Their government is supporting it, so they get good government support. But I think it would be a good thing just to think about. I realize it's not easy to start up a museum, but you don't have to do everything all at once. You just gradually add your exhibits. So, and we're happy to help you if you want to get, just consult with what we've done to build up our own museum, which is an all virtual museum. So you don't have the cost of having a building, running a building. You can do it virtually. Again, thank you, all of you who were speakers today. And I personally found it extremely informative, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Carole
much.
did have her hand up now, so I know we're trying to bring this to an end. Carole?
Can I be heard?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. It's so late. I don't know how to navigate this Zoom anyway. But I just wanted to add about the promotion of the languages of the Hanunuo, Surat and the Surat Mangyan. De La Salle University already digitized the Surat Mangyan, and we have given Emily. Thank you for mentioning that I did 2 years of being principal in the Mangyan Education Center. And true enough, I changed the curriculum and made Surat Mangyan and the Ambahan priority courses and subjects in class. And I think that that kind of promotion and inspiration to the young Mangyans did a lot also. And De La Salle is picking up and thinking of talking about an exhibit or a museum. I am sure that on the second floor of De La Salle University, Manila, they have oral copies, oral histories and copies of indigenous languages. Palawan, Bohol, in the south, they have the Alangan and the Iraya languages on tapes also, in an attempt to create not a museum but an exhibit, just a holding at De La Salle University, just for because I think it's the university that hosts the Linguistic Society of the Philippines, by Brother Andrew, and they started with preserving certain indigenous languages. And I know, I'm not sure whether Hanunu'u is included, but Alangan and Iraya is included there, one of the two of the Mangyan tribes also. Also, in the academe, we at NCCA, we are also advocating, and Dr. Felipe De Leon of the NCCA is here also with us as a participant. And I know, sir, you are one with me that we are advocating the intellectualization of indigenous languages by using it in thesis, in articles. Our main problem lang is advisors and panelists of certain theses are not knowledgeable of those indigenous. We have a poverty of PhDs who can sit on theses like that. But I know that in the Kapampangan Study Center, or the Kapampangan Study Center had already a collection of all the permutations of the Kapampangan languages. Robbie Tantinko had already created that. It's just holding a part of the museum. It's not a museum per se, but there are holdings and they're trying to preserve, but not only preserve, but intellectualize the language by using it in academic formats, in thesis and dissertations. And there have been a lot. And NCCA, I know, had published certain, like in Bohol and Ilocano, even in Ifugao, certain dissertations. And we hope that certain scholars of Hanunuo, the Mangyans themselves, can write in their language. Zosing, Attorney Evangelista, you're there. You can submit a legal paper in Hanunuo and even in Surat Mangyan, and that would be really so unprecedented, and that would intellectualize the language, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carole. Anyone
I guess
else?
that's it. Yeah.
I think that's it, huh?
Well, I guess we should wrap this up then. Again, I'm Greg Nedved from the National Museum of Language. And I want to thank everybody for attending. And how many were out there today? I counted 90 plus, which is pretty incredible. Plus, we have the 38 students. We're really glad to have them as well. I've seen this video a couple times already, and every time I see it, I learn something new, and that was true this time as well. And the questions and answer part is oftentimes, the best part of any presentations. I think that's true today as well. I want to thank all those individuals that were involved in this. Chiara, the filmmaker, certainly the Mangyan Heritage Center, and Cristina Juan from her job out there in London. She's the person who actually, was responsible for hosting this event. So we want to give her a shout out as well. I certainly want to thank Mr. Brookes. And as a reminder, as he said, we have World Endangered Writing Day going on today. There's a number of other programs that are going on today. And if you want to register for them, I think there's still time. It's www.endangeredwriting.world. Again, www.endangeredwriting.world. And finally, I want to close. I'm going to try a couple of Mangyan expressions, which I don't know how they're going to turn out here. Salamat means thank you. And Daya Ka means goodbye. I don't know how that sounded, but you know what I was trying to say.